The bow and arrow was a premier weapon of the late Paleolithic and Neolithic hunter-gatherer, along with spears and javelins, and with close combat arms like clubs and axes being a secondary consideration. Since about 30,000 BC, the development of projectile weapons technologies had allowed developing bands and tribes to protect themselves from predators and hunt prey while minimalizing the chance of being harmed themselves. So it's not surprising that such weapons became so prominent for so long. By around 10,000 BC, the Pre-Pottery Neolithic period began in the region of the Fertile Crescent. It was a time of emergent proto-chiefdoms, farming and herding, and some people began experimenting heavily with arrowhead and spearhead technology. They developed specialized points for a wider variety of functions, and they had greater penetrating power due to their shape and the materials used. The surviving points from this time, which archaeologists have so far managed to find, help to paint a picture of advancing cultures in the region, including sites like Byblos, Amok Valley, and Tel Halula. All three of these sites showed telltale signs of an evolving agrarian society, including the cultivation of cereal grains like emmer wheat, einkorn wheat, and barley, as well as flax for clothing fibers and oil. They had begun herding and the management of livestock such as pigs, sheep, and cattle, and they were working on the new regional housing construction methods using mud brick, clay, and limestone, which would become the standard for several millennia. They also established long-term mining and quarrying operations for sources of local stone. All throughout this era, the various tribal villages and agricultural towns in the region maintained a precarious ongoing political situation. What that means for the purposes of this video is that, through trade or tribute, materials like flint and obsidian extracted from one site might be carried dozens or even hundreds of miles away to another site where natural deposits might be less prevalent. For example, obsidian from the volcanic Anatolian site of Mount Golu can be found not only in nearby adjacent tribes and villages, but as far west as Catalhoyuk, 120 miles away. The mountain supplied a bountiful source of obsidian to a contact zone nearly 180 miles in each direction, with the closer sites incorporating a greater percentage of obsidian in their total flake industry, sometimes as much as 80% at the sites most adjacent to the mountain. It is therefore one of the primary sources of arrowheads and spearheads in the region, with the remainder being made from local sources of flint or chert, which represented the majority of workable stone in most places. Flint, chert, and obsidian tools were an extremely common part of Neolithic life in this region, and almost everyone would have had some experience with them. In fact, they were considered so vital that one of the most important considerations for placing a new settlement was the availability of local workable stone sources, almost as important as fresh water and food resources. By the time the Neolithic period began, flint had been in popular usage for tens of thousands of years on account of its widespread availability and how relatively easy it was to work with. Flint knapping techniques were used to flake pieces off and produce the desired shape. They would often be heat-treated by fire in a process called annealing, to increase hardness and durability. Using these methods, a wide variety of cutters and choppers could be devised for use in everything from knives and axe heads to agricultural tools. Flaked microblade and microlith technology was at its zenith during this region's history. Microblades are thin blades made for use as arrowheads or spearheads, about 3 to 5 centimeters in length and about 1 centimeter wide, often geometric in design with parallel lateral edges, and often incorporating barbs for opening nasty bleeding wounds on the target. Transitioning to a sedentary environment allowed some crafters to heavily experiment with shape and technique, perhaps to a greater degree than was ever possible before. By around 8000 BC, the most agrarian human societies were developing new weapons technologies like the Byblos points. These points are specialized spearheads, arrowheads, and darts, about 5 to 9 centimeters in length and 2 centimeters wide. They are bidirectional blades, generally requiring a higher degree of crafting expertise than microblades or microliths. The heads often have tangs, which are used to affix them to a shaft of wood or bone, adhered using bitumen, lime plaster, or natural glues. There is a high degree of standardization in both the knapping and annealing processes, pointing to the beginnings of specialized production rules in these societies. Considerable research has been done on the site of Tel Halula in particular, where thousands of points from the time have been found, including sickle blades and other domestic cutters, as well as weapon heads, mostly of the Byblos type. The agricultural sickle blades are of particular interest, beginning with a carved handle of wood or bone, throughout which they made a number of long, V-shaped incisions. After that, some hot bitumen was placed into the incisions, the blades were fixed in place, and more bitumen was added, adhering the blades to the handle when it dried. The making of these sickles, which were common in the region by 7000 BC, was the result of a marvelous synthesis of various disciplines and technologies, combining available resources. The people of Tel Halula could get bone from hunting gazelles and killing livestock, flint from local sources, and bitumen, which they also used to waterproof baskets. Simply put, the rise of sedentary agriculture in the Fertile Crescent contributed heavily to the development of more robust and lethal projectile weapons in the region. The rise and spread of Byblos points and other similar technologies would have brought hunting to its zenith here, and it also probably contributed to local wars and invasions of nearby peoples possessing slightly less robust weapons and agriculture. Projectile technology continued to develop with the invention of the kiln or earthen oven and the development of early metallurgy. The size of arrowheads and spearheads continued to grow over subsequent millennia as the people switched from stone to metal.